Well, it is time for the Women's College World Series. Is there a chance this is finally the year that OU and OSU meet in the championship series? Also, the NBA playoffs roll on, and even though the Thunder has been out for more than a week, should fans actually be feeling better about what Oklahoma City did? We'll talk about all that and more with Tulsa World columnist and our good friend, Berry Tramel, on the Jenni Carlson Show. But before I bring in Berry, I want to encourage you to subscribe. First to my YouTube channel, at Jenni-Carlson. Just hit that subscribe button. It's easy, it's free, but it helps me out a bunch. Then I hope you'll subscribe to my Substack. You can subscribe for free, or if you want to support my work with a paid subscription, those start at $8 a month. I hope you'll consider subscribing no matter what level. Well, Berry, it is Women's College World Series week. Are you as excited as I am? I get kind of excited about this week.
Well, I'm pretty fired up most years for it, but especially when both the Sooners and Cowgirls are this good. You mentioned it. The ultimate in Oklahoma would be if we had an OSU-OU, a Bedlam series in the championship. We almost got it 2 years ago, and it's looking like these might be the two best teams, along with, if you go by the super regional performance, OU, OSU, UCLA are the three schools that swept in 2 games. So, both teams are rolling as they get to Devon Park. So it could be the year 2024.
I'm going to have to get used to that Devon Park thing. That may be the thing I struggle with most in this Women's College World Series. What to call the place? It's been Hall of Fame Stadium all these years. So, okay, Devon Park. I'm locking it in right now. What do you think about this field, Berry? I mean, OU, OSU, obviously two teams people around here know well, but is there a favorite? Do you feel like we have a sense of where this tournament could lead us?
Well, the Sooners are the favorite, and, it's nice to seed Texas number 1, but the Sooners are the favorite. They've won 3 straight national titles. They've got a juggernaut with Patty Gasso. Texas has a really good team. OSU has a really good team. UCLA has all kinds of teams have good teams. But until somebody knocks off the champs, the Sooners are the queens. So OU's the favorite. Everybody realizes that. But I do think the gap between Oklahoma and the rest of the field is narrower this season than in past years. No dominant pitching for Oklahoma. The Sooners are scoring about the same amount of runs per game as they did a year ago, but they're giving up about 1 run per game more than they did last season when Jordy Ball was mowing people down. You remember Jordy Ball in the World Series last June? No earned runs. I think it was 24 in the 3rd inning or 25 in the 3rd, whatever it was. Jordy Ball, 0 earned runs. Sooners aren't going to get that kind of pitching, I don't think, this season. So the gap is narrower than we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, we remember Jordy Ball. Lots of people would like to forget Jordy Ball, but that's a whole other story. So you mentioned the gap tightening. It sounds like you're of the mind that the gap is tightened because the Sooners aren't as dominant. Is that true, or has the level raised in your estimation? Is that gap tightened because of what everybody else is doing, or is it largely about the Sooners?
I think it's about the Sooners pitching. I really do. I mean, we've had outstanding softball teams in the NCAA for years and years and years. Oklahoma State. This is one of their best teams. Might be the best team, but they've been really good. I mean, they made the semifinals 2 years ago, and UCLA's UCLA, and on down the line. So I think that's really what it is. I'll put it this way: Jordy Ball was still pitching for Patty Gasso. If she was going to start on Thursday night against Duke or whoever, they'd probably be number 1 seed, so they'd be playing whoever Texas is playing. But Stanford, then I think the gap would not be narrower. So I do think it's about the Sooners.
Okay, so we've nibbled around this idea of OU OSU, a Bedlam championship series. Berry, I have actually written about this multiple years. When I thought, even after I let some games play out, I let it get close, I let it get possible before I floated it out there, and it never has come true. Is this a legitimate shot? Should I even propose the idea, or just sit on my hands and let things get down the road a little bit?
Well, I don't see any reason to sit on your hands. I mean, go ahead and throw it out there. I do think it's a long shot, just because it's all a long shot. If the Cowgirls making the championship series, I mean, that's not a sure thing. And if they did make it, it's not a sure thing the Sooners will be waiting on them. So the odds are against it, but the odds are better than they've ever been, probably. OSU's playing very well. Ran through the regional, ran through the super regional. Sooners have righted the ship. They won 14 straight now, I think. I can't remember if it's 13 straight, whatever it is. They're on a nice winning streak. Had a little bit of a dip, lost the 2 to Texas, lost the 2 to OSU. But they're playing really well. I do think it's a good field. Let's see. We had most of the favorites won. So we don't really have any Cinderellas in this field. Alabama's the lowest seeded team at 14. Alabama's not a Cinderella. They've been an established power for a long time. So I like this. The depth of this field is really good. So I think a lot of teams could win it. I think a lot of teams will make a lot of noise. And I think the odds are that OU and OSU won't meet, but they could.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they start out on opposite sides of the bracket, that helps out. That's a first check in the right direction. But then I think what you said about how well both of them are playing, to me, they both come in looking as good as they've looked in a long time. Now, we've had some years in the past when I've thought something similar about these two teams, but I do think it sets up as a strong possibility. I think it's something to be hopeful for if you're a fan of softball around here. Now, I don't know how fired up everybody else in the softball world would be about a Bedlam series to win it all. I mean, I have to think that most people around the Bedlam or around the softball world would just as soon not have 2 of those in-state teams there. 1's quite enough, but 2, I think a lot of people would be up in arms about that.
Oh, yeah. And you'd hear a lot of people grumbling about the home field advantage and all those things, which there is. I mean, I think there is a pretty good home field advantage for OU and a decent home field advantage for OSU. But them's the breaks of the game. I mean, it wasn't Fresno. It wasn't Plant City, Florida. It wasn't somewhere on the East Coast. It wasn't somewhere on the West Coast that took this event when it was just a little thing that nobody paid attention to and played it. Put it in a park that at the time was state of the art, and over the last 35 years has just gotten better and better and better. And now is, seats 13,000 and is a jewel of a softball park and is every bit as foundational in the NCAA sports calendar as Omaha is to baseball, which is something we never thought we'd say. Yeah. So, if there was a time when if you didn't like Oklahoma City being the permanent home, you could do something about it. That day is past. Can't do anything about it now. Sooners have taken advantage of it. I think Kenny and Gajewski and the Cowgirls have taken advantage of it, and that's what ought to happen. You ought to be able to take advantage of it. I know this. The Cornhuskers of Nebraska and the Blue Jays of Creighton have not really taken advantage of the Omaha having the men's World Series these many years, 75 years, I think it is, maybe longer. So Sooners and Cowgirls have taken advantage of it.
Definitely so. Okay, so we've talked about the locals. Is there a team that they should be on the lookout for as a team that could really upend not only the hopes of maybe a Bedlam championship series, but maybe one of the Bedlam rivals winning this whole thing? Is there UCLA ran through their super regional? We've got Texas as the top seed in this tournament. Is there a team that you would be most worried about if you're Patty Gasso and her team or Kenny Gajewski and his team?
You know what? I don't see a team that really just worries me. I do see a couple of pitchers that worry me. The gals at Stanford and Duke are just dominant. And in a one-game showdown, they could give you problems. So when you look at teams, UCLA has the magic. They got the pedigree this season. They got the history. They're always legitimate. Kelly Inouye Perez is the coach. She goes back to the Lisa Fernandez days as UCLA as a catcher for the Bruins in the early 90s. So she's shoulder deep in Bruin lore. So UCLA is probably the one you would probably fear the most. Not Texas. Texas did not look good, I did not think, in the Super Regional against A&M. A lot of mistakes there, a lot of wild, out-of-control games. They scathed through it, got to Oklahoma City, but I would say UCLA probably would be the team I would fear the most if I was the Sooners or the Cowgirls.
All right, let's skip away from softball. Let's go from softball to hardwood, Barry. NBA playoffs still in full voice, still going, even though Oklahoma City's obviously been out for a minute. But here we sit after Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals. Dallas leading 3-0 over Minnesota. With what we're seeing out of the Mavs, is the Thunder feeling a whole lot better about what happened during its playoff run?
I assume not, but I am. I feel better about the Thunder's status. Turns out so far, they have played the Mavericks much better than Minnesota has played, getting down 3-0. Now, the T-Wolves and the Mavericks have played 3 really good games. One went to the buzzer. Dallas has won them all. But you know what? The Thunder and the Mavs played 6 really good games. 1 blowout, won by the Thunder. 1 or 2 at the wire, split. And then 3 that were really good games, and then just somebody, sort of took control in the last couple of minutes, and 2 of those 3 were won by Dallas. So I like what the Thunder's done. I mean, to me, all 4 of the teams in the Western Conference semifinals were NBA finals caliber teams, maybe even NBA championship level teams. And the Thunder just came out on the wrong end of a tight series with Dallas. Denver came out on the wrong end of a tight series with Minnesota. And to me, this portends very well for the Thunder. This is a team that's young, getting better, has an identity, knows what it wants to do, and has a lot of capital moving forward. So I like this team a lot. And I just think what we've seen Dallas doing with Minnesota shows that the Thunder was a tough out. And it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just a team that rose up and said, hey, we'll give it the old college try. No, they're a really good team that's got championship pedigree and perhaps a championship future very soon.
Yeah, I think what you said at the start is probably right. I'm sure for those guys wearing the short pants, there's probably a feeling of, hey, if the Mavs can do this, we could have done this. You got to sort of look at it through their eyes and say, well, man, if we'd have figured out a way to go beat the Mavs, maybe we're up 3-0 in the Western Conference Finals. And so I'm sure there's some level of, what if in the Thunder's mind. But yeah, I think you've got to say how close they were. Is this a situation where it just comes down to matchups? Is this more of a, that the Thunder had a Lou Dort and Minnesota doesn't? I don't know. What's at the heart of why this matchup has been so much tougher for Minnesota, a team we saw roll through the first round, much like Oklahoma City, looked like they were going to roll through the second round, but still knock out the defending champs, the Nuggets. Why is this matchup? Why is Dallas having such an easy time with Minnesota?
Well, I don't know that it's easy. I would say it's successful. All 3 games have been tough.
Yeah.
But I do think there is something to the fact that the Thunder matched up well. We always talk about how it's a bad matchup for that Thunder offense against the Dallas defense. Thunder likes to attack the basket. Dallas protects the rim with those 2 guys, all those things. But I do think the Thunder defense was a bad matchup for the Dallas offense because the Thunder could guard Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving rather well. You don't ever stop those guys. Well, they actually did stop Irving. But you don't really stop Doncic, but you do slow him, and the Thunder did with Lou Dort. And I tell you, Santa Clara Williams did a fantastic job on Irving and neutralized him in a lot of ways, which Minnesota is not doing. Minnesota has a wonderful defense. We saw it really put the kibosh on Denver, but the Thunder defense was equal to the task as well. So I think that was the difference, is that the Thunder could go into every game knowing they could stand tall with Doncic and Irving and not let those guys get off. And the Timberwolves had not been able to do that. Both of those guys have had excellent series, and Minnesota finds itself 3-0 down as a result.
Yeah, and as good as Doncic has been, and I think that sort of speaks to what Lou Dort's done, to me, the Kyrie Irving factor is one that he was just not as much of a factor in that Thunder series. Now, it wasn't that he was a non-factor, but not where we've seen him at the level in this Western Conference Finals. So the job that they did on Kyrie is we probably didn't appreciate it at the time, maybe like we should have, but I think they defensively did a pretty darn good job on Kyrie Irving in that semifinal series. So does any of this, though, as you think about, how we can now look at that series with the Mavericks, any of what we're seeing now, does that change your thinking, or do you think it changes the Thunder's thinking as they go into the offseason, needs in the draft, needs in free agency potentially, or trades? I mean, does any of what they're seeing now do anything to change the trajectory that Sam Presti and others might be on with this offseason?
I don't think so. I think this fortifies the belief that they were on the right track. And I think this shows that, hey, we had an excellent team. We had a title contending team. Yeah. And so, people are always wanting to change things. Lose a series and a lot of self-inspection, a lot of, we got to change this, we got to do that. But the truth is, the Thunder had a plan. The Thunder deployed that plan. The plan worked famously beyond anybody's wildest expectations. And so some people want to say, let's change the plan. It seems like the plan is working really well. So of course, the Thunder could use a big man. They could use a little more rebounding. They could use, somebody that could match up with the brutes, of whether that's Jokic, whether that's, Giannis or, Embiid or, the guys that can really push you around. Everybody could use more help with that regard. But they got a guy that's going to get a lot better, and his name is Chet Holmgren. So, one of the things we said is before you go turning over every leaf looking for help, find out what you got. And they found out what they had in Chet Holmgren. It looks really good. And guess what? He's played 1 year. So a year from now, they're going to even know more about Chet Holmgren. So, yeah, I'd be looking for draft plums. I'd be looking for good trades. But I wouldn't be changing the plan of, hey, this is our core, and they're really good, and we're going to ride these guys to great heights.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's talked about, a big free agent acquisition or going after, some sort of trade that sends out a bunch of these guys, that's foolish to me, Barry. I mean, yeah, maybe a Josh Giddey gets traded, but if you go trading a Lou Dort what are they doing if they do that? I mean, to me, there's very few pieces that we saw play in the playoffs that I would trade away. Josh Giddey might be the only one, quite honestly. I don't know. What do you think? Are there other guys that you would say put them in a trade deal to maybe try to get somebody?
If somebody, I love Aaron Wiggins. If somebody wanted Aaron Wiggins, I might say, well, what do you got? If somebody wants, I'd hate to lose Case and Wallace, but sometimes you have to send out good to get good. If somebody wants Lou Dort, I'd laugh at him. I mean, this is a guy that went into battle and lived to tell about it with Luka Doncic. Yeah. This is a guy that made Brandon Ingram want to retire from basketball in these very playoffs. Holmgren, Santa Clara, SGA. What are we even talking about? So, I would not do a whole lot of roster tinkering because this is looking really good. This is a deeper roster than what the Thunder had in 2011, in 2012, when Westbrook and Durant and Ibaka and Harden were coming up. That bench got thin pretty quick. This is not a thin bench. This is a pretty deep bench. Arkansas Williams has been a really good and solid young big man coming off the bench. Can they use somebody better? Sure. But he's been pretty good. And when you look at Kenrich Williams, the old hand who's solid. So, Isaiah Joe's a sharpshooter off the bench. So it's a deep bench. I like the bench. I don't mind trading some of that bench, but it's a really good bench. I would not be retooling this roster anytime soon.
Yeah. Hey, before we get out of here, Barry, we started off this week, Memorial Day, with the passing of Bill Walton. Surprising news to me, quite honestly. I didn't realize that he was in bad health, quite honestly. But I know him more as a guy that does color commentary and is a delight to listen to during games. I know some people didn't think of him as a delight, but you got any favorite memories of Bill Walton that spring to mind as we reminisce about his passing?
A couple. If you were a child of the 70s, you knew how great Bill Walton was, both in college. His 21 of 22 performance in the NCAA finals against Memphis State, I think that was 1973, just phenomenal. Bill Walton is one of the 2 or 3 poster childs of why college basketball will never be what it once was. Bill Walton played 3 years of NCAA basketball. There's not anybody playing college basketball that can get within 100 miles of what Bill Walton could do. He was a guy who then went on to the NBA and was a phenom in his second year, leading the Portland Trail Blazers to one of the great Cinderella stories of championship history in the NBA. Portland was not considered a title contender and goes all the way to the championship finals and wins it. And he was ahead of his time. He was an unbelievable passer. He was not a frequent outside shooter, but you know what? He was so skilled. If he came along today, Bill Walton would be shooting threes like crazy and would be very good at it. He was a great defender. I mean, he's the modern NBA player before it ever happened, and he would excel any level at any era of basketball. And then he became, quite the character. Even late in life, just in general, he had the best quote about conference realignment that I have yet to hear. Here we're on the verge of the rampant change in the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10. Everybody's changed, and UCLA and USC go to the Big 10 a couple of summers ago, and Bill Walton really lamented that decision. He said, and of course, great UCLA player. He said, "I don't want to join the Big 10. I want to beat the Big 10." And to me, that just encapsulated what really is going on here. If you're the Sooners or the Longhorns, you shouldn't want to join the SEC. You want to beat the SEC. And if you're USC and UCLA, Washington, Oregon, you want to beat those guys in the Rose Bowl. You don't want to join them. So instead, we got what we got. But he had a wisdom. He also had a joyfulness. He was a hoot to listen to on college basketball analysts on what was it? Pac-12 games. So just a fascinating individual, fascinating personality, and a wonderful basketball player. Really one of the best of all time. His feet gave out on him his last 8-10 years in the NBA. He was a shell of his former self. But at UCLA and those first 3 or 4 years in the NBA, he was as good as it gets.
I would have liked to have seen him in the modern game today. I think you're right. I think his skills he would have added to, and it would have been just phenomenal to see. And then I would have liked to have seen him on that pregame red carpet walking down the hall. What would he have worn to games? I can only imagine what Bill Walton would have looked like in those situations. Would have been a lot of fun to see.
He might have wore tie-dye. He literally might have wore tie-dye.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Okay, Barry, tell people where they can find your stuff, what you're working on with the world. Give us a little rundown on things for you this week.
Well, I'll be at the Women's World Series this week, writing some college football later in the week, too, and my first week at the Tulsa World. So look me up over at tulsaworld.com.
All right, very good. Well, hey, thanks again for joining the Jenni Carlson Show. And remember, subscribe to my YouTube channel and to my Substack. Just search for Jenni Carlson and subscribe today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.